Hi everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar. My name is Teresa and I'm part of the Noltic team. I will make a little introduction to the webinar and I will also introduce our speaker today. So this webinar is organized by Noltic and by Andres Perez. Noltic is a Summit Salesforce consulting partner. We developed Salesforce solutions since 2017. We are based in Ukraine, and we actually also work a lot on sharing and growing the Salesforce expertise in Ukraine here. And thank you, Andras, for your initiative to run this free webinar for us. Even so, our audience is very international today. The first idea of this webinar was to support Ukrainian developers this time by sharing knowledge with them. So a few words about Andres. Andres Perez is a senior manager and he is a Trailhead Academy Solution Architect lead at Salesforce. He's with Salesforce since 2009. Andres holds a bachelor degree in computer science, and overall he has like 30 years of professional experience as a developer and architect. So nice to have you here today, Andres. I hope you guys enjoyed the webinar. If you have any questions on the webinar later on, or you have any other ideas how we can cooperate, you can contact me directly via LinkedIn or just drop us a message to contact@noltic.com. And yeah, enjoy. Andres, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Teresa. Thank you so much for that introduction and for reminding me how old I am. 30 years of experience. So, and thanks for, seriously, thanks for Noltic for organizing this event. As Teresa was saying, this actually started maybe a few, couple months ago that I contacted Oksana, who I believe is also on the call. I found out that she works for a Ukrainian partner, and I was like, "Yay, let's try to help them in any way that is possible." So I reached out and I contact her, and then started talking to Teresa as well on organizing some events. I learned about Noltic. They organize a group. Where it's like I call it the Noltic Academy, which is a free 3 months project for Ukrainians to learn about Salesforce and help them evolve in their careers. So I offer my help to help, and but then we decided that some of the topics were going to be a little bit better to do in a bigger audience. And that's how these webinars, the one today, and a couple more that we're planning for this summer, got organized. So thanks, Teresa, and thanks, Noltic, for organizing that. So that's a little bit of how I can help support Ukraine in these very, very difficult times, as you guys know. I see that there's a lot of names on Spanish and some other names. So what I would like is for you guys to write on the chat message on the Zoom window which country you're calling from, and if you're from Ukraine, even if you're not living at home for obvious reasons right now, just do let me know that. I want to see where you guys are dialing from, please. Egypt. All right, cool. So I just put on the Ukraine. Good. Couple from Ukraine. Nice, very good. Nice, Ukraine. Beautiful. All right, so let's get started. And today's session is demystifying OAuth flows in Salesforce. This is a very important topic for a certification exam in Salesforce called Identity and Access Management. I believe this was one of the few exams that I did fail when I first attempted at once. Like I eventually passed it the second time I took it because I wasn't familiar with the topics of OAuth flows. So as a revenge, I want to let the people know about the different flows. What is OAuth all about? and how you can choose which flow you want to use on your particular app projects. So let's get down to topics, and we're going to first of all and foremost, obviously, this is still a Salesforce presentation. So we have to go through the forward-looking statements. Don't make any purchase decisions based on how awesome Salesforce will be. Today's agenda, it's divided in several sections. First is we will talk about what is OAuth. Then we'll talk about how does OAuth work in Salesforce. Third, we'll do a demo. I have built an application. I have all the code shared with you guys on a repo. I'll give you information later. I posted on LinkedIn. The demo is for the web server flow, which is one of the most complex on the amount of steps that is actually involved in getting the users logged into Salesforce. Is probably actually one of the best flows for that reason. But there's few other flows. So then the last section before the Q&A, it's which of the flows you're going to use. So I think personally, in my opinion, this last section is probably the most important one of all. So let's begin with the first question. What is OAuth? When we talk about OAuth, you are probably thinking of having your users logged into your applications. But there's actually two very different aspects of that process, which is authentication and authorization. So we're going to cover and explain the difference between these two. So let's suppose that you're an architect and you have been tasked with the idea of building a website for your customers. And of course, you need a way to have your users logged into that application. So what are you going to do? You have a couple options. The first option is to, in the database that you already have for this website, you're going to add a table for your users and storing their first name, last name, password, and all that stuff. And then manage that through a code. And of course, you are making this process complex just for letting users log in. But most importantly, is that you better maintain good quality of code and good standards in order to avoid a hacker to get access to your users table. So you're taking high security risks with that. Option number two is provide or use an authorization server. Provide access to your users through a authorization server. This is going to be much simpler, and it is going to be much, much secure, because now it is the responsibility of Salesforce, LinkedIn, Google, Apple, Facebook, Twitter, whatever OAuth authorization server you're using to protect that data. And that's their area of expertise. So that's the option that I would go with. But before we actually go into that question, we should have asked one question before that. Why? Why did you want to provide access, login access to your users? Why would you want your users to log into your application? Sounds like an obvious question, but there's actually two main reasons you want to do that. First reason is called authentication. The second reason is called authorization. Authentication deals with who is the person or the user that is logging in. Authorization deals with what the application can do for the user. Let me give you a couple examples so we can understand this. Let's go back to the authentication. And for example, you are building this commerce site. So you need to store some information about your users, including the credit card, shipping address, shopping cart. Bob's credit card is going to be different than Mary's credit card. So you need to know who is the person who's logging in. if you were going to provide some type of tracking inside your website, you want to know who owns the records or who's not logged in since a particular date, right? You're considering the who in here. That's authentication. Authorization, on the other hand, which deals with the what the application can do. Oops, I forgot this little part here. Authentication, it's using SAML assertions. Authorization, which is the what, we have a couple examples, which includes if you were building the commerce site, you want the user to authorize the application to charge to the credit card stored, or to authorize to order some items who are running low on the inventory. If you're tracking, you want to authorize the app to view your reports, your user reports. And that is done with OAuth. So on one hand, we have SAML, which is for authentication. And on the other hand, we have OAuth, which is for authorization. So let's go a little bit deeper into these. And let's compare SAML and OAuth. As we talked about, SAML is about authentication. Who is the person who's logged into your site? It is specific to a user, to a who. And in SAML terms, SAML language, we say that the identity provider tells the service provider that the user should be allowed into the system. OAuth, on the other hand, it's about authorization. What can the application do on behalf of the user? It's specific to an application. And in terms of OAuth language, we say that the user authorizes the client application to access the resource server. In case of Salesforce, where you're trying to access data from Salesforce, then Salesforce is the resource server, and it defines the application using a connected app. There has been for a long time, I would say for now, misuses of these standards, and some developers have tried to do authentication with OAuth. OAuth was not designed for authentication. It was designed for authorization. But some people leverage these standards out of what the standards really were meant to be and start doing authentication with OAuth. So the standards evolved, and there's a new concept called OpenID. OpenID works on top of the OAuth 2.0. So it's an extension of the OAuth standards. And what it does is it provides information that helps you identify the user, basically doing authentication with OAuth. All right, so now that we understand what OAuth is all about and how is it different from SAML and OpenID, let's take a look at how Salesforce provides you with OAuth. And it provides that through connected apps. So when you go to the setup menu and you are creating the OAuth, this is basically the screen you're going to see. You're creating a connected app that have information about the application and the logo of the application and whatnot. It also provides a consumer key. That consumer key identifies the application. Notice that when you're building an application, you're not really configuring users yet. You're just configuring applications because you are defining something that the user will authorize the application to do something for that particular user. So it's about the application, not the user. That's one big difference between authentication and authorization that we just talked about before. So once we have the consumer key, now we can talk about the consumer secret. The consumer secret it's used on some flows and should never be exposed to your users, not even what I called accidental sharing. So what is accidental sharing? If, for example, your application was going to use the consumer secret from a JavaScript site, never display it in the HTML, obviously, Mr. User, this is the secret. Of course, it will never do that. Oh gosh. Sorry about that little message. We're not going to put that on an HTML page, obviously, but even if we do it through JavaScript, an advanced user can go into the browser, do right-click, inspect, and take a look at the value of that particular variable. So you will be accidentally sharing that. So make sure the consumer secret always stays on the server. It never comes down to the front end, not even in JavaScript. The next part that we have in here, it deals with the scopes. And basically the scopes specifies what the user is going to authorize the applications to do. In this particular case, we are authorizing the application to be able to use the APIs. We're going to allow it to do refresh token. We're also going to do OpenID. Okay, so this is what the applications can do, what the user authorizes the applications to do. The next important section here is the callback URL, which should be, and it's kind of a hidden bit of knowledge, it should actually be called callback URLs, because you can put more than one URL in that particular section. The callback URLs, it's very important for some OAuth flows, specifically the web server flow, and we'll take a look at that in the demo. But also for some other flows, it doesn't really have to be a real URL. Actually, it doesn't even have to have the HTTPS protocol. It could be like my app colon whatever protocol you want, or Authority colon whatever protocol you want in some of the flows, of course. Also, there's a very important section, which we're not really going to go into too much in this particular webinar, which deals with the management of the security features, including which IP address you can log in, which profiles are authorized, and some other permissions like that. Last but not least, when you are creating an application, a connected app, and you want to test it, make sure that you give it about 10 to 15 minutes in order to let the information from your org propagate through Salesforce network. And why is that important? Well, when you're logging into Salesforce using Connected App, you're going to go into login that Salesforce or test that Salesforce, obviously. But this is actually not configured on that server. It's configured on your own server in Salesforce under your domain. So it has to propagate in order to be able to be accessible. All right. So having said all that, let's take a quick detour, and we're going to go into a particular demo. All right, so this demo, which can be reached at this particular domain, et-OAuth, Heroku app, you're going to come to this page. There's a couple of things before we actually go through the demo. There's few resources that you can get from here, from the Salesforce documentation. There's also access to the slides. I will put the recording once we're done, obviously, here in this link. You can access their repo and play with this application on your own. And you can actually access the demo application, which is basically this application which we are seeing right now. So having said that, I have already configured some information. I created a scratch org, and we have a username and a password and a login URL with the domain. We have a consumer key, as we described on the previous slide. We have a consumer secret, and we have the URL callback. We're going to take a look at one of the flows, which is the web server. I have here other flows that you may want to play with later time. And what is happening here is basically we got a little screen where we are going to just click on the authorize button to start the flow. So when I do this, it asks me to enter, and notice who's asking that. It's not Heroku application anymore. It's Salesforce who's asking for this information. This is very, very critical. And it's asking for the username. So let's go back in here, click on the username, which gets a copy over. Then we can paste it. And we go back in here and we copy that. And then we go back in here and we paste it. And we click login to Sandbox. There's a couple of things that are going on in here. I will talk about it in 1 minute through the slides. But basically, it goes into asking the user if they want to allow access to Salesforce to perform these particular tasks. These are the tasks that are defined on the connected callback under the scope section that we did mention. So if this is you and you don't mind the application having this particular access, then we're going to click on the allow button. And then we get to one tab here, which is called the results. This is the information that the server provided to us. Includes the access token, which is basically kind of similar to the session ID. It provides a couple more pieces of information, including on this particular flow, it does provide a refresh token. And it provides a couple more pieces of information. We also have information about the OpenID, the user ID. So we know the first name, last name, we know the email address, we know whatever else we want to know about that. We have access to, because of this flow provides the refresh token, we can have the refresh token. And at a later time, tomorrow, if we store this in the database, tomorrow, a week from now, we can just use that code to reauthorize Salesforce without having to ask the user if they want to provide access and what's the username and stuff. So we can do that on behalf of the user at a later time. And we could also have the access token. And let's actually click on here. And we can actually go into Salesforce environment without having to ask the user to log in again, because we already have that information when the user used the OAuth to log in. And last but not least, we could also do some queries through the APIs. So for example, we can go in and take a look at the different accounts that are provided or that are stored in the server. So basically, this is a little demo that helps you understand how OAuth flows works, how you get access to the resource, and a few more pieces there. There's other flows. We'll talk about that in just a little bit, but let's go back to the slides and review what just happened and what we saw and what we didn't see, which is probably the most important part of all. So what happened? Well, step one, Astro, we're going to use this little Astro just for fun. Astro wants to authorize the application to use Salesforce data. So what does it do? Well, it goes in and navigates to that particular page, which we saw earlier. And this menu is not really the way that your menus are going to look. Of course, you're not going to know the username and password for whoever's logging in. And what it's actually going to look like is probably more like that. So you want to access through Salesforce, you want to go through Google, LinkedIn, Apple, Facebook, Twitter, whatever else. email, whatever. So once you click on the Salesforce button, then the browser redirects you to Salesforce. And this is critical. Your application does not know, well, in the case of the demo, obviously it does, but your application should never know the username and the password of the user. And actually, Astro is not going to give the username and the password to your application. It's going to give it to Salesforce. Now, if Astro is not logged in, the browser doesn't currently hold a session, then of course this screen is going to show up. If the browser through cookies or whatnot already holds a session, then we may skip this screen. Also, it is possible to have SAML do the authentication of the user. So once the user authenticates itself and it says, this is me, okay, then Salesforce takes you to another screen within Salesforce, which is going to provide the different scopes based on the connected app. Again, this step may be skipped if Astro has already provided the authorization previously. So if I click on the Allow button, then Salesforce uses, and this is a very important part of this web server flow, it uses the callback URL to call the server and provide the authorization code. Notice, this is important, notice that Salesforce is not just providing the browser the access token. It provides an authorization code, and this is for security. If Astro went to our application and for some reason landed in a hacker's page, which is trying to have a picture that is our application and is trying to trick the user, the hacker's application will not get the access code. Because what's going to happen here is that Salesforce will use whatever information it is on the connected callback on the URL and take you to that particular page. If the hacker say, oh, and send this information to hacker.com, obviously hacker.com is not on the connected app. Hacker.com will not get the answer. You, when you build this, you're going to say myapp.com, your app will receive this request with the authorization code. So it's the server, not the browser, who receives the authorization code. Once the server receives the authorization code, then there's going to be an exchange of information. The server will send the authorization code to Salesforce server, and it will also send the consumer secret. The authorization code is what we just received on the previous step, and the consumer secret we know because that's the information that is on the connected app. So even if the hacker was able to do that, they should never have access to the consumer secret. So this is basically says, yes, this is me. Salesforce will reply to that with the access token. The access token is like the session ID that gives you that you need to send on every subsequent request for data, like in the accounts table, and it will expire in a couple hours depending on how you determine all that stuff. But the important part here is that this conversation is between servers. It's not, the browser is not involved, which means that basically Astro is not even aware that this conversation is happening. He doesn't need to know that this conversation is happening. Once we have the access token, we can use that to get data. So our servers, and typically to protect the access token, the web server, not the browser, is the one that is going to talk to Salesforce. Because again, if you provide that access token, to the browser and make JavaScript do the call, then a user could go into the browser, right-click, inspect, and view the access token and use that for something else. As you saw, you can actually open, depending on the scopes that you provide, obviously, which permissions you give that application has, which basically which permissions that access token has, it could go and open a browser with that particular access token. So we should always keep it as secure as possible, leave it on the server, and the server is the one that is going to make the queries to get the data in the API. All right, so now that we have talked about what is OAuth, we saw one of the most complex flows in regards to the number of steps. There are some flows that is only one step: get the data, get the response, done. This one, it's talking about the callback URL and a few more steps in there, which makes it complex, not as in difficult, but is in the number of things that you have to keep track of. So now we understand what OAuth is and what the web server flow is. Let's go to what I believe is the most important part of this particular session, which is basically, out of the many flows that Salesforce provides, which one is going to be the best for my needs. So for that, I have created this flowchart, which we're going to build in as we speak, that guides you through the different flows and what you're going to be trying to do. So when you are first trying to configure a connected app, and you just created, you just configured, you got the consumer key, you just got the consumer secret, all that stuff. You want to test it out to see in order if the connected app is properly configured or not. So if you're testing, and only if you're testing, you should do the username and password. Username and password is the easiest flow to work with, therefore it's great for testing, but it's the most unsecure. So you should always try to avoid it. Only do this username and password flow for testing the connected app. Once you know the connected app is working, then you worry about the other flows. Or if you build the other flows and something's not working, well, you can go back into the username and password and make sure that everything's still properly set up or whatnot. You didn't forget a little step or whatnot, and then just use it for testing. It's not intended for nothing else. It is a gray box because there is no refresh token provided, as the bottom shows there. So let's suppose there are no testing. Now I'm going to be working this for real. I want to run my my application and be able to get an access token and whatnot. So then the next question is, are you using a service account? Now, what I call the service account is basically an integration you're building with a Salesforce that will run on its own every night or every week or every month or whatever, where there's not going to be a user entering username and password, but it's going to be more like a independent application that needs to do its thing at 3 a.m. We're not going to ask the users to wake up at 3 a.m. and enter the passwords there. That's what I basically call a service account. So if you're building a service account, then you want to use the JOT bearer flow. It's in green because it requires a previous authorization. That could be done through a different flow, or it could be done through the management of the connected app by providing which profiles, permission sets have automatically access to the flows. But if you're not doing a service account, then the next question should be, have the user previously authorized? Because if they have, then you may be able to use the refresh token. Again, in green, because it does require a previous authorization. But if this is the first time the user is trying to authorize, or you don't have a previous authorization, then the next question is, are you building a web application? And if so, then the next question is, do you have a backend server? If you do have a backend server, let's say you have something on Node, or you have something on ASP.NET, or you have something on Java, or you have some Python or whatever, PHP, whatever backend server you have, then you can use the web server. Why? Well, as we saw in the demo, there's this concept of connect, go back, and the server talks to the server. So you need to have a server. Then if you do, you can just use the web server flow. Now, if you're building a web application, but you don't have a backend server, let's say you only have HTML pages, like, for example, if you're building just an application that deals with HTML, something like Lightning Web Components of core, then without a backend, or maybe you're building some HTML pages for a GitHub repo or something, then you can use what is called the user agent flow. But what if you're not building a web application? Then the next question is, which device type are you building this for? If you're building something that doesn't have a UI, let's say, for example, you're building something for a terminal window, command prompt window, something like SFDX, right? SFDX, which is a command line application. Well, actually, they do the job better flow. But if you're building one for a device that doesn't have a UI, then you can use the device flow. Kind of similar if you're building an IoT application. So if you're building an IoT application, again, it's something that doesn't really have a good or doesn't have an user interface, then you can use the device flow for that as well. If, in addition to that, you are making an application where you're going to have this on thousands of different chips that you sell each of them to a customer. Let's say you're making fridges or cars or whatever, and you sell that application in a chip in each of the cars, then you need to identify which car it is. You may also use a flow, which is called the asset flow, which basically allows you to tell which chip this is for. So you can identify, so if there's a problem with it and the IoT application reports back to Salesforce that there's a problem with its chip, you know which chip it is because it is associated with one particular user. So then you call the customer or email, whatever. Mr. Customer, we just found that the system on your car is broken. Please go back to your nearest dealership and get it fixed or whatever. All right, so that would be the asset flow if you need to identify each IoT device. If you're building something on a mobile, which it will have its own web browser, then you can use another flow, which is called the user agent flow. The user agent flow. All right. So we've seen this little chart build, and hopefully that helps explain or decide which flows you want for different use cases. And that is actually the end of this session. So if there's any questions, which I hope there are, write them down on write them down on the chat window, or basically speak up if you want to come off mute. No questions, either totally clear or people did not even understand what I meant.
I think the first option.
Nick has a good question. Nick, the project that I built, this project in Heroku, it has, let me actually give you guys this link here. So you guys have it. On that, there is, under resources, there is the link to the repo, which takes you to this repo. This repo has a couple folders, has a README, so make sure that you do go ahead and read all the information in there, which tells you how you can work with that. But also, there is a couple folders. One of them is Heroku, and one of them is Salesforce. Salesforce allows you to create a Scratch org that has that connected app configured already. And Heroku has a Node.js application that basically implements the web server, username, password, user agent, JOT, the device, and the refresh token one. So OpenID Connect, Siddharth, OpenID Connect, it's basically as I mentioned on the slides, let's bring the slides over here. Oh, and by the way, the slides are also part of that repo. The OpenID, this one right here. I should actually go and present it. Hold on, I'm sorry. Let's go back. And let's go to a presenting it. OpenID is basically an extension to OAuth flows that provides not really the authorization what the OAuth was intended to be, but also provides information about the particular user. And okay, let's stop right there. And then if we go back to the OpenID, one of the things that the OpenID gives you is this SOP, which is basically a unique identifier for your user. And the way that this works basically is, this is the user ID, this is the org ID, and I'm running on a Scratch org, so that's the test. So basically it gives you that information. Now that you have an access token and you have that ID, you can actually query for the particular user record using that. You just make a call with the access token, and you basically get this, which is information about the user, their username, display name, email. So OpenID is about knowing who is the user, where you started with the OAuth flows. I have to connect two Salesforce orgs. How should I proceed? That's a different question. I don't know if you have heard about Salesforce to Salesforce, where actually provides that connection for you. If not, if you have two Salesforce, oh, one thing that I didn't mention, which is probably kind of part related of this question, is the connected application must be, the connected app must be either on a test.login, like a Sandbox or Scratch org, or in a production. But it doesn't have to be on the same org. So you could have one of those production orgs have the connected app, and from any of the two orgs, you can connect using that connected app. So you can use a connected app to connect to any other org that you have. And this is basically how many tools, I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember Workbench, which is trying to be deprecated for many years now. But the Workbench uses the connected app in their org, but it allows you to connect to any of your orgs, right? So maybe that will help there. Where do you configure the access token lifetime? Under setup, there is a setting for session settings. where on the top it specifies how long your sessions are for. That's how you would tell it the lifetime of your access token. These are 2 hours of inactivity. Not necessarily 2 hours from the time you got it, but from 2 hours from the last time you use it somehow. There's a little bit of weird math in there, so I'm not going to go into that, but that's that one first. Ivan asked, how do you think if we're using the user agent flow, it's okay to keep access token and refresh token somewhere in local? No, local storage. It's still your smart users are still going to go be able to go into the browser and see that information should be stored on your server, not cookies, not local storage, but on the actual server. Maybe you want to store on the local storage. You can store some ID or something that like the primary key of a table in your backend database, where you store that private information. Those things should never come down. For 2 Salesforce org Webflow, that Andres showcase should be good. Well, yeah, it could be. Depending if you want to do the 2 orgs, is it an user who has the 2 orgs, or is it a system like a service account? I think if it is a system account, then I would probably use a Jot flow. If it is a user, then a Webflow would probably be good enough. Hello, Andres. It's really nice and clear explanation. Thank you so much. I'm glad you liked it. If I wanted to include the signed certificate or a CA signed certificate in some scenarios, might want to implement 2-way SSL. Could you please go through those details? All right. So in the demo, sorry, not in the demo, in the repo that I created, under the README, I talk about the different folders. There's one folder that contains the certificates, but obviously you don't want those certificates for your applications, because those are my certificates, and anybody who's reading this will have access to the private key, which you don't want. But here's a section on how you generate those certificates. If you want to learn more about certificates, SSL certificates and whatnot, highly recommend these 2 videos. They're old videos, but they're very, very, very good. And one of the things that you do is you create what is called a CSR, which is a certificate signing request. So once you generate that file, in the steps here below, we're going to generate a self-signed certificate. But if you want it to be signed by a CA, you send this file and money to the certificate authority, and they will give you a CA signed certificate that you can use. Then you go back into the connected app. Which you have this, you can create this scratch or with exactly the same metadata, because that's what I'm providing to you on the repo. I don't know if I should have done edit. Maybe I should. Yeah, that's okay. I will click cancel. You can choose a different file and load your certificate here in this particular section once you have it back from your CA certified authority. Do we always use Jot flow when we want to have connection between Salesforce and service provider? Well, the Jot, it's a very good option for service accounts where you don't want the users to actually log in. If that's what you're trying to do, have that integration between Salesforce and Amazon Web Services, then yes, you can. If you don't want a user, then yes, a Jot will be a good option. Now, these flows that we talk about, especially in that flowchart at the end of the presentation, they use it's based on standards protocol, which is OAuth flows. So although the details may be slightly different, the same concepts applies for different providers like Amazon Web Services. So in that case, yes, if you want users to have their own account in Amazon Web Services, your Salesforce users to have accounts on Amazon Web Services, then probably you want to do like a web server flow or something. But if it is a service account, then a JOT will be a very good option for you. Thanks for the demo on the web server flow. All right, good. Thanks, Jan. Question, we connect Salesforce using Heroku app by using just OAuth with covers. All right. So we connect Salesforce using Heroku application, okay, by using just OAuth. Hopefully you're not using the username and password, doesn't say here, but hopefully you're not using that, which covers both authentication. Yes, if we go back in here, maybe that was not very clear on my explanation, but if we, and I can probably bring this, no, let's do the demo. Let's go through here. I don't remember which slide it is. Let's go through this one. No, next one. So this on the right here, that is the authentication. And for the authentication, you can use SAML. But that is not OAuth. That is just getting into so that you can do OAuth. Once you are in, then you go through this. This is OAuth. This is SAML, or not SAML, sorry. This is authentication. This is authorization, where you are allowing or authorizing, you as this dude over here, you're authorizing to access these permissions on your behalf. So you're saying, yes, this application can do this for me. This is OAuth. This is not. Yes, it is part of that, of course, but because we need to know who is the user who's authorizing the app. So in order to know the who, you use the authentication before you actually do the authorization. So authentication process and authorization. So we say that OAuth is only authorization. So yes, OAuth is only authorization because this part is OAuth. This is not OAuth. It's kind of part of the OAuth flow, web server flow, yes, but it's a way to know who the user is that is going to give access to. But what I also meant, or what I also said, is that if we go back to here, when we talk about the difference between SAML doing authentication and OAuth doing authorization, a lot of developers were building authentication knowing who the user is, because you actually have information about that. OAuth will tell you who the user is. But that was not the intention of OAuth when OAuth standards were built. When the OAuth standards were built, the intention was authorization. So yes, let's suppose that it kind of accidentally gave you information about the user, but that's not what it was built for. So now that you accidentally have that information, you start using that, and then the industry, I guess, decided to enhance OAuth and provide OpenID, which is more for authentication, knowing who the user is. Hopefully that's a little bit more clear that way. Can you please go a little bit more in detail how permitted users works in Salesforce OAuth? All right, so for that, oh shoot, I just closed the chat window. Hold on. Oh, good, I got it back. I wanted to do escaping here. All right, so when you are on the identity, let's go into view. You can go into the manage section, and you can edit policies. You can who is permitted, and you can say anybody who can self-authorize. So you can say only users who are approved can authorize, then if you have this option here, then you indicate maybe I canceled. I should have not canceled. I should have saved. Now I'm gonna break my demo. That's okay. We can display this page because the browser blocks cross-domain cookies. Oh, seriously? Okay, hold on, give me 1 second. Let me go through incognito mode just in case. And I'm gonna put this right over here. Okay, I'm gonna go into test.salesforce. And from the demo, I have this guy here. And I have this guy over here. I'm glad I did this copy. I'm glad I did that copy paste. So helpful. Oh no, I need to check my email. Oh, it's taking a bit. It's taking a bit. Salesforce.com. Come on. All right, I'm not gonna be able to do that as part of a demo apparently, but going back to here, can I go back?
Probably you can switch to classic.
I can only go to classic. No, that's totally, no, that's, I don't know. So on that particular page, you can specify which profiles, which users they are allowed to use this particular application. So that will make it more secure rather than having like anybody can self-authorize. When you do specify which users and you make like anybody, then what I said before about one org having the connector app and a different org being able to log in, obviously that will not work anymore because the profiles are for that specific org. Those profiles will not show up on the connected app application, obviously. Thank you. All right, you're welcome, Kari. I wanted to ask, what is stronger, the scope of OAuth or the profile permissions? What is more strong? I would say that you have to have the profile permissions, but if you log in through an OAuth and your OAuth does not allow you the different scopes that we talked about, okay, let's recover this because I think this is also broken. Yeah, let's go back to here and browser login and try doing this. Now I'm gonna have to re-authenticate. So let's go for the JOT bearer token, which is much easier. Oh, I broke it. Oh shoot. I broke my demo. Crap. I'm not gonna be able to do a demo. That's fine. Because of that thing that I changed for the profiles, I think I totally broke it now. That's right. I can create another scratch org. That is what I love about scratch orgs. I try to do all my projects with, especially demos, with scratch orgs because if I break it, I just create another one. Boom, done. Next. So maybe I can answer this with a picture. I'm glad I took a picture of that screen somewhere over here. So back to still answering Katya's question. If you don't provide access to the API, you will not be able to use this session to get data through an API, okay? Or refresh token or whatever other scope you have. Even if your profile has, that is an API user, if the user logs in through this connector app and they're not able to do an API, which probably doesn't really make a lot of sense because that's what you want to create a connector app for. But if you don't provide an API, then the session that you get is limited than the session that the same user gets through a logging into the browser, or maybe through using the SOAP API, you can get a session ID, or you can, you get a session ID that session ID will have the ability to connect to the API, but this one, which we're not providing the API, will not have access to that, right? So which one is stronger? How can I answer that? You must have the OAuth connected app must give you whatever you need on top of what the profile gives you. I think it's not which one is more stronger, but you need both doors to be opened. If you have like a corridor with two doors, one is open, whichever it is, but the other one's not closed, you're not going to get through. The only way that you can get through is if both of them are open. So the profile needs to give you that permissions, and the OAuth will need to give you that permissions. If you are logging into Salesforce through that connected app, if you're logging through a different manner, then that connected app is not into account, and the access token that you get, it's not limited by the connected app. Hopefully that makes sense. Great session. Muchísimo gracias. Hey, there you go, Nick. Thank you. I have to get ready for a demo. All right. Looking forward to reviewing the recording again. All right. Good. Excellent. Bye, Nick. Thanks a lot. Thanks. Great presentation. All right. And I think we are out of questions. So that means that we're pretty much done. So thanks, guys, for joining us. And I'll be doing another sessions to support Baltic and Ukrainians during the summer. I'll keep you posted on my LinkedIn. Follow me on El Toro IT at LinkedIn. Nice seeing you again.
Thank you, Andres.
Thanks, Teresa. Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, guys, so we will send you the recording and all the information you were asking for, and stay tuned.
Yes, thank you very much. See you.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye now.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for joining.
Bye.